That was a tough one. There is no other way to put it, as the Hoos fall to 4-1 on the season after losing to the 10th-ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish by a final score 35-20. That doesn't mean this game wasn't without its highs as well as its lows, and we saw some flashes of a potent offense mixed in with some of the struggles that many predicted the Hoos may have in this not so hospitable environment that is South Bend at historic Notre Dame Stadium, where the Irish continue their home win streak. Let's take a look at how this broke down. The Hoos were winning at the half, don't forget. It was 17-14 at that point. Perkins came out hot. There were some chunk plays in that first drive, and he hooked up with Joe Reed for an early touchdown, although Notre Dame was able to follow that up by feeding Tony Jones Jr. with his first touchdown, first of 3 on the night. Notre Dame was able to run the ball effectively, and we're going to get to that time by time. Now, the problem was holding on to the football, as many had been concerned about if there were inclement weather. There was not inclement weather, but yet there were still major turnover concerns, and obviously so. 5 turnovers in this game for the Hoos, just 1 for Notre Dame on a muffed punt that was recovered successfully by Joey Blunt. We look at the points, 35-20, I should say, Notre Dame. The yards, though, were just about the same. 338 yards for the Hoos to 322 for Notre Dame's offense. Problem was there was quite a bit of going backwards after some of those turnovers that set up the Fighting Irish for success offensively. 334 passing yards from the Hoos, who were behind for the majority of the second half. That masks the fact that there were only 4 total rushing yards in this game by UVA's offense. Now, that's not to say that they only moved forward 4 yards. That's to say that the total displacement between yards lost and yards gained was only 4 yards, and we saw that quite frequently as Bryce Perkins ended up running 16 times and ended up negative 29 in rushing yards on account of the immense number of sacks that Perkins took tonight. Just 4 rushing yards, but allowing 157 rushing yards. Previously, the Hoos were 12th in the country with just 75 rushing yards allowed, 157, more than doubles that. Add on another 165 passing yards, and Notre Dame was able to put together 322 yards of total offense, more than the Hoos had been allowing to this point. Just 4 for 15 for the Cavalier offense on third down, not getting the job done. Notre Dame only slightly better at 6 for 15, but it didn't matter because there were 5 turnovers by this Wahoo offense and 1 by Notre Dame. And the breakdown here, I should say, distribution. 3 fumbles, a pair of interceptions from Bryce Perkins, 1 to Coleman and the other to Hamilton, I believe. It made this one tough sledding all the way through. There was not enough discipline, and we saw the moment get a little bit too big in some cases. We're going to take a look at some of the coaching calls here, because I think this speaks a lot to what the Hoos were fighting through. First up, there was that first drive touchdown to Joe Reed, which was very similar to what we saw on a 2-point conversion. They were in short versus ODU last week, and Perkins was able to successfully roll out to his right. They had spread the receivers out, and the defenders didn't bite. They stuck with their receivers. Perkins was able to make it into the end zone with his legs for 2. In this case, perhaps Notre Dame had been studying the tape a little bit, and their defenders were quick to abandon their receivers, and that allowed the easy hookup to Reed from Perkins for that passing touchdown. In the second half, started that one off with a Brian Delaney onside kick. It was a great call by Bronco Mendenhall, recovered cleanly by Bryce Hall. Should have been a real momentum starter. Unfortunately, it didn't play out that way, but that was a gutsy play call, especially away, that gave the Hoos a really good chance with excellent field position to come out and build on that 17-14 lead that they had at the half. Unfortunately, no dice on that one. But take a look at this play calling issue that I kind of have with Bronco tonight. No real running game, and yes, it wasn't that effective, but we saw a focus in the second half on short high percentage passes that Bryce Perkins was able to complete quickly. He didn't have to sit in the pocket too long, and that's because Mendenhall understood that the offensive line was going to be a liability in this game due to some of the inexperience that it had individually, but also cohesively as a group. They hadn't had the opportunity to practice together as much as they needed to. And Notre Dame, you saw it if you watched the game, that group of defensive backs all the way through the line, they were big, strong guys, very athletic, and it was going to be tough for a unit that hadn't really practiced together to stand up to them and keep Bryce Perkins upright, which was absolutely a key to this game and played a big role in why the Hoos had so many turnovers. In fact, the most outstanding player this game had to be Julian, not Junior. He's a senior captain for Notre Dame. But he was a monster. He had 3 sacks in this one, 2 of which were strip sacks, forcing the fumble. The guy really was a game changer, and the O-line couldn't stand up to him. He went straight around Ryan Nelson his second time through and just blindsided Bryce. There was not much Perkins could do, and that's why it was great for Bronco to focus on these short, high-percentage passes, build up some confidence for his quarterback early on, and make sure that he's able to deliver those passes before the pass rush of Notre Dame was able to exert its tremendous pressure upon him. The problem is when you don't have a line that's overly experienced, they need to have some confidence builders too. And we saw in the second half and the first half this line overmatched. I think we could have seen, perhaps with the Hoos in a lead here for a little bit, maybe a little more commitment to the rushing game. The difference between pass blocking and rush blocking is this. When you're blocking for a pass, you can't pass the line of scrimmage if you're a lineman. When you're blocking for a run, you can. That allows you to generate some momentum. So instead of these younger guys, more inexperienced guys being back on their heels time and time again, they would have had the opportunity to get forward, start the momentum in their favor, and then Talapapa, as we saw a few times, could run strongly behind them and pick up the yardage that was needed. The other thing is, if you can establish a ground game, run effectively on the early downs, you'll be able to limit the third and longs that we saw, and that was one of the situations that led to a Perkins pick later on in the game. Really, the point is this with the offensive line, they were not well prepared, and that was through no fault of the coaching staff or themselves, truly. It was mostly an injury-based problem that the Hoos faced tonight, and hopefully that'll be able to be rectified during this bye week. They'll clean that up, because that's not going to be an ideal problem to be having against Miami, home of the turnover chain. And we saw Notre Dame was able to just pin its ears back, and they were able to take full advantage of our inexperienced line being back on their heels for the majority of this game, despite being in the lead at one point. And yes, the Hoos were in the lead for a while. That didn't last the whole game. As I said, in the second quarter, there was the fumble sack by Aqua, leading to a Sebo Flemish touchdown. He later left the game. UVA scored a field goal. Notre Dame missed a field goal. So there were opportunities on both sides to really develop momentum here. And it felt that through the second half, Notre Dame was able to capitalize. UVA had it at the half, and they weren't really able to push forward for some of these great field position situations or a Notre Dame missed field goal, not being able to capitalize the way they should have. And that's what happens when you shoot yourself in the foot all night with turnovers. You're not going to be able to generate the momentum, even though UVA did control the clock and had more yards of total offense than Notre Dame. It's just the kind of thing that will always end up losing a game for you. And Bronco Mendenhall knows this. He's been on this team for a while. Now, we didn't see the rain that many had predicted last night. It was miserable in Indiana. It almost would have been nice if it had rained, because then I would have had that to point to as an excuse for the Hoos. The fact of the matter is that excuse didn't show up and is not valid in this game. There's been a major turnover problem with this team. We saw it. They were -1 with the turnover margin on the season going into this one, and now they add another -4 to that, -5 on the season, -5 in this game. It's going to be impossible to win against these top-tier opponents and ACC foes if you're going to be doing that. We saw signs of this. We saw the turnovers, and we saw the inability to really generate momentum until late in the game. finally starting to grind against these turnovers and create some momentum against weaker opponents. You just can't do that here. And I mentioned that Ian Book was one of the better quarterbacks late in games in the FBS. Well, he didn't really have to do too much in this one. Let's take a look at the individual stats. Bryce Perkins had 30 passes complete out of 43, which is a pretty solid percentage for him. For 334 yards, I'm happy with that too. I'm happy with 2 passing touchdowns against the Notre Dame defense that had only allowed 1 so far in the season. That was to Georgia. I'm not happy that he was going down so much, that his rushing yards were negative. Now, minus 29 in this game, that's terrible. And 2 interceptions, we can't have that. We saw one was later in the game, just trying to make something happen downfield, wasn't there. And as I mentioned earlier, a 3rd and long situation, which the Hoos were clearly focused on preventing from occurring throughout this game. Well, that manifested later on when Perkins threw an interception in that exact 3rd and 9 situation that they were trying so hard to avoid. Wayne Talapapa, just 10 rushes in this one for 31 yards. But you saw, if you were watching, there were a few times when he was really able to give it a burst behind a forward-moving offensive line. I would have loved to have seen them try to do that a little bit more earlier on in this game, if for no other reason than to control the time of possession just a little bit more. Joe Reed had a big game, 9 receptions for 107 yards and 1 touchdown. But Hasise DuBois, wow, he was my standout performer from the Hoos. He hit both 100 receptions on the career and 1,000 receiving yards on the career, with a night where he had caught 9 balls for 143 yards and a touchdown to put the Hoos up at the half. And what a thing of beauty that was. Regardless of the rest of the game, that was a pretty play. Hasise Forsace, as I like to say, 6 points for DuBois, and a wonderful hookup from Perkins to one of his top 2 receivers in the end zone. Had Hoos fans feeling good at the half. Unfortunately, weren't able to capitalize in the second with that momentum. But Ian Book, he wasn't the guy that hurt us today. Just 165 yards overall through the air, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 17 passes completed on 25 attempts. A very quiet showing for Mr. Book. Terry Jones Jr., though, showed that the Notre Dame offense and the run game specifically was a force to be reckoned with. Maybe a slumbering beast, a sleeping dog that should have been allowed to lie a little bit longer, because he went for 131 yards on the ground off of 18 carries. That's good for 7.3 yards per carry and 3 total touchdowns from Mr. Jones Jr. Previously, he'd only had 78 yards, I believe, in the season. Regardless, this was way too much. 148, I should say, he had on the season, which averages to about 74 per game in the 2 games they had previously played. So as you can see, doing about double that in this game. Sibo Flemister, as I mentioned, left the game early, but he still managed 6 rushes for 27 yards and a touchdown, punctuating one of the fumble sacks by Aquara, just taking that one in for a few short yards. Really vulturing that one almost from the defenders in that situation. And Cole Komet led the pass receivers with 4 catches for 65 yards. Yet again, another strong showing from the tight end who returned versus Georgia. He's shown to be one of the guys that Book likes to look to quite frequently. But that wasn't what hurt us here. It wasn't the passing game for sure. If anything, we're going to talk about the discrepancy between the rushing attacks here. 157 yards allowed by this UVA rush defense, way too many from a front 7 group that features such players as Jordan Mack, Zane Zandier, etc. Meanwhile, the Hoos just 4 net yards on the rushing game. That's miserable. There's no way to get around that, and a lot of that was moving backwards, and that's problematic. We saw way too many times when Notre Dame's defenders were all up in the Hoos backfield. Even on passes that Perkins was able to complete successfully, he was clearly under pressure throughout the entire game. He had to deliver those quick passes with defenders in his face. And that's what makes it so dangerous for him when guys like Ryan Nelson are allowing these defenders like Aquara to come around the outside and take clean shots at the quarterback. That's a problem not just for this game, but moving forward. Because if Perkins were to go down in that situation, The Who's are going to go the way of the Titanic this season, and it's going to be a big sinking ship, and it's going to sink very, very fast. So this has to be addressed through the bye week. There's got to be some consistency with the line. Hopefully guys will be able to get a little bit healthier, and hopefully that will allow Perkins to avoid sustaining a major injury himself. We saw way too many big hits. Too many times I was sitting here, sitting here, I should say, to start and end this at the Charlottesville Draft Tap Room. Thanks very much to these very wonderful folks. I was sitting here screaming at these TVs and saying, oh my gosh, another hit like that. And I couldn't believe that Perkins kept getting up. Billy Kemp, another guy, the hits that he took from those big Notre Dame athletic defenders, I couldn't believe he kept getting up. And it's a testament to the heart that these guys did play with going in to a tough place to play. And the odds were against them in this game. Again, just about a 10% chance of victory. You would have had to handicap 10-plus points in order to make any money off this one if you were betting for Notre Dame. And that wasn't the case for the Who's, the underdogs in this game through and through. It would have been a bit of a Rudy story. That's not what we got today, but we did get to see some heart and some fighting through adversity here. Standout player, as I mentioned, Hasise DuBois. The guy put together a great game, and congrats to him on 2 career milestones. And let's say something about this passing attack. Bryce Perkins was able to complete more passes, or a higher percentage of passes, I should say, in this game than in any of the previous ones, I believe. And that was a strong play calling decision by Bronco. As I mentioned, I would have liked to have seen that mixed in a little bit more with some rushing plays to get the offensive line moving forward and to keep Notre Dame on their heels a little bit, because they were thinking they had free pass rushes all through the second half, and they sure did, as evidenced by these strip sacks and, of course, the Perkins blind side, the 3rd and long that was picked. There was just no way that he was going to be able to hold on to the ball long enough to make that deep pass successfully, and also for the UVA receivers to create the separation on their side of things too. That's the flip side to these line problems. I could go on all day about the way the offensive line is really going to be a pivotal position group moving forward. They always are. But sometimes it takes a loss like this one to see just how crucial they can be. And there's no doubt about that, because it affects not only Perkins, who's out there taking shots, not just Talapapa, who's trying to pop off a long run and get some momentum, but also the ability of those receivers to break free in their routes and create the separation that Perkins is looking for. So throughout the efficiency of this offense, it doesn't work without the line. There's no efficiency is what I'm trying to say here, because the line is where it starts, the line is where it ends, and that's what's necessary for this offense to function as a well-oiled machine. Even if we're seeing upwards of 330 passing yards in a game, even if we're seeing the vast majority of the clock controlled by the Who's time and time again, they're just not going to be able to get the job done if the offensive line doesn't control the line of scrimmage, and that's what we saw today. We saw an overmatched group that was not able to fight off the strong defensive players that Notre Dame had set up on that side of the ball. They were dominant, and they deserve props for that. That does not mean, though, that there aren't positives to take away from this game. As I mentioned, the passing attack really did work. I'd like to see maybe the UVA offense go to these types of passes a little bit more. At times I felt this season that Bryce Perkins has thrown the ball deep downfield or tried to make something happen that isn't always there. If you're able to give him enough short passes, slants to guys like Joe Reed, balls over the middle to big receivers like Hasise DuBois, fade routes in the end zone where only your guy's going to be able to make a play, I think Perkins is going to be able to develop a lot more confidence as a passer this season than he maybe demonstrated these past couple of games, and that's going to allow him to feel a little bit more comfortable in the pocket, which is constantly collapsing around him. And again, that has to get fixed before anything else. But hopefully Perkins, with these short passes, high completion rate passes at his disposal, he'll be able to stick in the pocket a little bit more and complete those balls and feel good about that without necessarily always trying to roll out or feel the need to throw across the body, or perhaps roll out and then get his clock cleaned by strong defenders such as those on Notre Dame. So I like that step forward for the passing game. I like very much two top receivers, both over 100 yards in receiving and touchdowns for both of them. There's clearly a two-headed monster in this passing game for those receivers. I'd love to see more rushing. I think you got to have a balanced offense, especially when your offense is predicated upon controlling the clock like the Cavaliers' offense is. So that is my offensive negative takeaway outside of the line and, of course, the turnovers that plagued the Who's efforts all night long. Defensively, a good job limiting Ian Book. He's got some strong receivers out there, including Playbook, but you got to do better against the run. Jones Jr. hadn't been this guy yet this season, and this wasn't a part of Notre Dame's offensive profile going into this game. Now, there were signs. These, again, just like the defenders, a very athletic group that had the potential to pop off big runs at any time, but they hadn't done that to date, and it was surprising to see that happen against the 12th best running defense in the country. I would not have expected this to happen, and I hope that the Who's front seven learns from this, learns not to underestimate any offensive line that they happen to go against. And there were some great play calls by Coach Bronco Mendenhall, great plays by Bryce Perkins, and some great plays by certain defenders. Guys showing a lot of heart and hustle, just not enough to get the job done, as again, your UVA Cavaliers fall by a final score of 35-20 to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now, before I let you go, I have perhaps the most important part of the show here, which are my thank yous. First up, thank you to friend of WUVA, Jim Daves, and the whole UVA athletic department, the ACC network, Matt and Amelia and the rest of WUVA. We have a question. Let's hear the question. Oh my goodness. Did we run a sweep at any time? I didn't see any sweeps. I don't know if you did. I can't say I am exactly omniscient here or saw every play, but I didn't see any sweeps. I didn't see enough outward movement, and that's a great point because what we're talking about here is an overmatched group of front offensive players versus a really athletic, strong group of defensive players. So a sweep would have been the perfect play to run. That's a wonderful comment because that would have allowed the running attack in Wayne Talapapa to bounce it outside and not have to deal with the congestion that Notre Dame was bringing, all of that pressure up the middle. And the other thing is, with all the passes that we were throwing, I mean, shoot, when was the last time a UVA offense threw 43 passes in one game? So 43 passes, that meant that Notre Dame was moving forward every single time as soon as the ball was hiked, regardless of what they thought was happening. There was no need for the linebackers to get back on their heels. They were bringing the blitz. They knew they had pressure and they had momentum. So this would have been a great opportunity to bounce it outside with Talapapa, avoid the congestion inside, avoid the big guys barreling downfield against the inexperienced UVA line, and give Talapapa the opportunity to make a play. And you know what? Even though it would have been a sweep, by gosh, that would have given the offensive line a little bit of a better feeling in their hearts and made them just a little bit hungrier, perhaps to push forward moving in the future. And it also would have made Bryce Perkins feel a lot more comfortable, in my opinion, if he knew that there was a rushing attack to lean on here, especially some of these early yardage situations when you've got the opportunity, right? Why not go out there? And if somebody, maybe a cornerback, blows up a play on behalf of Notre Dame, so be it. That's all cool because there are going to be more opportunities within this set of downs. We didn't get to see nearly enough of that kind of stuff. And again, I really felt like it was a rather homogenous set of play calling. For the most part, it was these short passes, and then, again, just 10 carries for Talapapa, only 31 yards, and that was pretty much straight up the middle for a guy that has a good amount of burst and the ability to take it outside and then cut it upfield. Great question. Thank you very much. Do we have any others? Well, that is a great point. And I should have brought this up much earlier. I would love questions. Please, pepper me with questions now. Pepper me with questions in the comments later. I'll be sure to address them whenever we get the opportunity. And as long as this show gets to keep going on, that's, of course, thanks to all the people I mentioned before and everybody else. As long as this keeps going on, I'll answer as many questions as you guys can give me. So thank you very much for that. And thank all of you for watching. Many thanks to the Charlottesville Draft Tap Room. This has been great. I had a heck of a time here. I'm hoarse already, you can tell, And that's not just from the show, that's from the experience here. It's the only bar I've ever been to where they've got Jenga over there in the corner, Cards Against Humanity, and so many different beverages on tap. Everybody's having a great time. Many thanks to these guys for giving us the opportunity to be here. I think it was a lot of fun. And of course, on top of everybody else, Jim Daves, ACC Net, Matt Amelia, WUVA, all the people who helped make this show possible. Well, none of that would matter if it wasn't for you watching right now. I can't say thank you enough. I've had a lot of fun doing this, and I'm excited to bring you shows every single week. Please like, share, do whatever it is, comment, constructive criticism, compliments, questions, whatever it may be. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. Go Who's moving forward. Up next, we've got a bye week. I will let my vocal cords recover, and then after that, the Who's head down on Friday, October 11th to face off against the University of Miami in Miami. That'll be nice for those guys. Maybe catch some sun while they're down there. But it's been fun. That'll be an 8 p.m. game. I will see you before kickoff then. And until October 11th, thank you on behalf of WVA. I can't say thank you enough. I appreciate it. I'm signing off.